Let the Halloween season continue with my ranking of the Saw franchise. This is a series of films that began 20 years ago in 2004. It's hard to believe the series has been around for 20 years, and my god, am I starting to feel old. I remember back in '04 walking out of a lackluster Anaconda sequel and seeing the poster for the first Saw movie. I thought it was the most metal poster I've ever seen, with the terrified Amanda Young on the poster, eyes wide open, with some really messed up metal contraption on her head. From that point, I knew I had to see this film. And from that point, I've pretty much been a fan of this series. There are 10 films in total, with an 11th on the way. So without further ado, number 10, Jigsaw. This one did rank a little higher on my first time ranking the series, but it's just so generic. Not only does this film not feature Jigsaw for more than just a few minutes, the traps are really lackluster, the story is completely nonsensical even for this franchise, and it just feels like a watered-down attempt to reboot the series. This was the first film after the final chapter, and it didn't seem like they were really trying. It did make money at the box office and spurned on more movies, but apart from that, it didn't really do anything for the series, and it's just a really lackluster and forgettable entry. Coming in at number 9 would have to be Spiral. I know some people kind of like this one, and I do appreciate that Chris Rock was trying to do something original with the franchise, but I just feel this one is just a little bit lackluster in its execution and its story. The film is basically about a copycat killer, and it doesn't feature Tobin Bell at all, which is not a terrible idea. You could continue the series in this way, but unfortunately it's just kind of a boring movie. There are technically worse films in the Saw franchise, and apart from a somewhat fun finale, it's just kind of lackluster. Chris Rock does try his best, but a very forgettable entry into the series, despite having the most star power of the series. Number 8 would have to be Saw 4. This one is just nothing special. The story this time around shows a cop who more or less is put into the game because he doesn't follow orders very well and basically breaches doors and things like that when he's not supposed to. This is probably the most undeserving Saw victim out of the entire franchise. And apart from that, it just kind of lazily continues the story. It does start off kind of interesting with the autopsy of John Kramer, and it's revealed that the film takes place at the same time as 3, so this is neither a sequel nor a prequel, but an in-between. But apart from a few interesting reveals, the film is just kind of dull and very middle of the road. Number 7 would have to be Saw 3D, or Saw: The Final Chapter. While this one may technically be worse than 4 and even Spiral, I find it to be kind of schlocky and kind of fun in a dumb way. It's really stupid, the story is nonsensical, the cameos from past Saw victims makes very little sense, and the ending will have you rolling your eyes out the back of your head. But having said that, it is kind of fun and ridiculous just in the way some of these traps are set up, and it does even star Sean Patrick Flannery of Boondock Saints fame, and he does a decent job in the movie. But it's really convoluted and stupid, and just not a good movie, but one that I do enjoy. A guilty pleasure. 6 would have to be Saw 5. This one is okay, and a lot of people tend to not like this one, and it's a little bit middle of the road, but I think this is the first one on the list that is actually kind of enjoyable. It picks up after it's a Saw 4, and follows this one detective, Strom. It has some interesting twists and turns, and a really cool opening, and I do enjoy this one more so than many others, but I do have to admit, it is a little bit standard, but still enjoyable. I like the tracheotomy trap, which is basically where this man's head is in a box, and he has to slit his throat to keep breathing. And I also like the secondary traps with these group of people. It's actually kind of cool to watch them have to work together, but fail to do so. Saw 6. The last of the numbered entries up until 10. Saw 6 shows this guy who basically works for an insurance company. He has to go through more or less this trials and tribulations that test the people who work at his company who have been denying people coverage who needed it to survive. This is the most political you'll see a Saw series get, but I actually do agree that a lot of people who work for these industries are probably not the best people. Not everyone, mind you, who works in insurance is evil, but their bottom line is to make money and not actually help people a lot of times. So it's kind of a social commentary that I can actually agree with to an extent. But apart from that, there's just some really cool traps this time around, especially one that I really like called the Shotgun Carousel. The performances are pretty good, and it also has a pretty gruesome ending that I really enjoy too. Tobin Bell, as always, is great in the sequel, and it's a fun entry. We have Saw 3. This one, I think, has one of the most unfair reasons for a person being in the Saw games. And that's more or less a guy who lost his kid is basically forced into these games just because he's depressed and isn't giving his daughter and his wife enough attention. So essentially, this man who had his child die has to go through these trials and tribulations all because he was overly sad, I guess. It's just kind of messed up if you think about it. I get that John Kramer wants him to count his blessings, but it's still a messed up thing to do to someone who lost a child. I do like this one though because it has some great traps as well as a pretty interesting story. It ties well into the first two, and I love the scenes with Amanda and John who have kidnapped the main character's wife and forced her to perform brain surgery on John so he live longer. It's a gruesome entry, and probably the most gruesome up to that point, but it has a pretty damn good payoff at the end, a really gruesome finale. And even though I think it's unfair that Jeff is being put into this game, I think the way they handle it is actually pretty damn interesting. A very gruesome and fun entry. Coming in at number 3 is Saw 2. This film basically did what any good sequel does. It takes the original idea of the first one and ups the ante. More traps, more gore, more convoluted plot, and more Jigsaw. Jigsaw is not really much of a character in the first film. This is really the film that more or less established who he is. And he's really good in this movie. He's a man who is dying of cancer, and he finds retribution when he survives a car crash and uses that philosophy to put people into these dangerous, gruesome traps and scenarios that they have to escape, oftentimes by dismembering themselves. It's a great premise for a film, and it's great to see John Kramer develop as a character in this sequel. The story basically shows a group of survivors in this house, and they must all go through saw traps, one of which is actually a detective's son, who's a crooked cop, played by Donnie Wahlberg. It's just a solid sequel through and through, and one of the best of the franchise. I won't give away any of the twists here, but it does have a damn good story and a really awesome surprise twist ending that you don't see coming, much like the first film. Coming in at number 2 would have to be the original, Saw. Released in 2004 on a shoestring budget, directed by James Wan and written by Lee Whannell, it shows a group of 2 guys in a room, and they must solve these mind and psychological games and even potentially risk mutilation as well as death in order to save their families and save themselves. Along the way, you see a detective trying to solve these jigsaw murders, which are people are found having been tortured in really messed up and gruesome situations. And on the people's body is usually a carving of a puzzle piece representing a piece of themselves that they were missing. It's a gruesome and messed up psychological horror crime movie, and it's really awesome. It has a really low shoestring budget of only $1 million, but it adds to the atmosphere and the feeling of this film. I really very much enjoy this one, and I do think some of the acting is bad, especially by Lee Whannell, and I don't think Carrie Elways is much better as Dr. Gordon, but apart from a few bad performances, this is still a solid horror film and one that I very much enjoy. But you just can't beat number 1, the new kid on the block, and that's Saw X. Despite being called Saw 10, this film actually takes place between the first and second movie. It shows John Kramer looking for a cure for his cancer and tries this experimental treatment, but there's a twist. The people offering him the treatment are actually con men and just do this to steal his money and fake the fact that they cured him and he still has cancer. He then does what Jigsaw does best and kidnaps these people and puts them through incredibly gruesome torture in order to teach them the error of their ways and see if they can appreciate life. The story is relatively simple this time around, but seeing John Kramer back is great. He was really underutilized in his return in Jigsaw, and this is a proper continuation of the character. Although he is much older, considering the fact that he is cancer-ridden, it kind of works timeline-wise. We could just assume he stopped taking chemo and Saw 2 and 3. However, Shawnee Smith returns as Amanda, and she does look noticeably older. Don't get me wrong, Shawnee does look great for her age, but it is kind of a noticeable element to this movie. But apart from that, there's really no flaws that I have in the film. Shawnee is great. Tobin is great once again as Jigsaw. There's another villainous character who's the doctor that more or less stole Jigsaw's money, and she's really great too. The film is honestly the best acted and has the most engaging story of the franchise. If you had told me the 10th entry into the Saw franchise, which was a semi-sequel slash prequel that takes place between two of the films would be the best film of the franchise, I probably would have laughed at you. But honestly, it just is the best. Magnificent gore, one scene that even makes my stomach churn where this leg is being removed, as well as just great performances and an engaging story. This is the best of the franchise. I'm weary from what we'll get with Saw 11, and I doubt it will be this good, but I am looking forward to it nonetheless. Well, that's my ranking. I thank you all for watching. I'll have another video out soon, at least 2 or 3 more before the Halloween season is over. This is a fun list to make. Leave your list down below, or just tell me your favorite Saw film in the comments. And peace out.